Okay, we'll call the March 28th regular council meeting to order. Start off with a proclamation of Economic Development Week, May 9th through 13th, 2022. The International Economic Development Council is the largest professional economic development organization dedicated to serving economic developers. And for almost 50 years, Economic Developers Alberta has been Alberta's leading economic development network, committed to advancing the economic development profession by providing resources, professional development, and networking opportunities. Economic development promotes economic well-being and quality for life for their communities by supporting the conditions to encourage job creation, business retention, and job expansion that facilitates growth, enhance wealth, and provides a stable tax base. And economic developers stimulate and incubate entrepreneurism in order to help establish the next generation of new businesses, which is a hallmark of Alberta's economy. Excuse me. Economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural and urban, local, provincial, and federal governments, public-private partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a variety of other institutions. And economic developers attract and retain high-quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in their regions. And economic developers work in the city of Wetaskiwin, and therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Tyler Gandon, do hereby recognize May 9th through 13th, 2022 as Economic Development Week in the city of Wetaskiwin, and remind individuals of the importance of this community celebration, which supports the expansion of career opportunities and improving quality of life. Proclaimed this 20th day of March 2022. Number 4, adoption of the agenda. Any additions or deletions? Okay. Councillor Aberley.
Thank you. I was not here on March 14th.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'd like to add an item, maximizing opportunities for local businesses to submit tenders.
That would be 16B. Anything else? Have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Nielsen,
I move that City Council adopts the agenda as presented.
as amended.
As amended, yes.
Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Ready for the question? Those in favor? I'm not putting up on my screen, so. Yeah, as well. Welcome. Can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Yes. Am I live? Okay. Thank you very much for seeing me this morning. My name is Barb Stenvall. I have a house at 4724 B49th, just down the street. I appreciate your taking the time to let me talk about my utility invoice. My mother was a resident in the house. We live out on a rural property near Winfield. And unfortunately, she fell, broke her hip, had it replaced, and then had a stroke a few days later. And the next day that I checked the house, it was full of water. The fitting had given way on the top floor of a bi-level and flooded both floors. Unfortunately, insurance companies view someone lying in a hospital dying as being vacant and don't cover the bill. We don't have a problem after looking at the bill with the water consumption, although it's very high. That's what went through the meter. That was needs to be charged. It's water that needs to be processed and has a cost, whether you flush a toilet or water your lawn. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't feel the same about the wastewater, which was viewed as the same volume as the fresh water coming in, 3 cubic meters. When I got to the house, of course, we quickly phoned a local contractor who came with his suck truck and started sucking out the water from the carpeting and the rest of the house. The top floor had about a ½ inch. The bottom floor, unfortunately, had an inch. And there was a lot in between in the ceiling with the drywall. So there was quite a bit there. My husband is a retired civil engineer and calculated, yeah, I mean, he's bored. He's 76. So he calculated out how the square footage, 1/2 inch and all the cubic meters, and came to the fact that we had paid this local contractor dearly to suck out 2.34 cubic meters, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's well over $350 worth. Normally, we wouldn't even say anything, but it's a double whammy with a significant amount of damage in the house. We're re-drywalling, re-carpeting, re-plumbing, re-everything. And then we have to deal with mom's funeral, etc. So we're asking that you take a look at this bill and see if there is room for revision. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Barb.
And I didn't have a photocopier to give you his calculation. You'll have to accept them.
We'll take your word for it.
You might not when you find out that he was a pipeline engineer. Oh, that would be super. Not used to doing this official work. But he's in worship. Okay. Well, it's a partnership. We have to have people for everything. Thank you. I do enjoy it.
Item 5, approval of the minutes.
Sorry, I jumped the gun on that. Still not right. I wasn't here on March 14th.
I move that city council approves the minutes of budget deliberations, March 2nd, 2022.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? You can hear now, but you can't read, so we're good. Okay.
March 14th, please.
Councillor Everly.
Thank you.
Ready for the question? Those in favor?
I move that city council approves the budget deliberation minutes of March 13th, 2022.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question? Those in favor?
I move that city council approves the budget deliberation minutes, or sorry, regular council meeting minutes of March 14th, 2022.
Moved by Counselor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question? Those in favor?
I have made note of Counselor Aberley's absence to that meeting, and I will update the minutes accordingly.
Mhm. Me too, I compass, me too. Perfect. Consent agenda, we've got council committee reports and development permit statistics.
I would move that council accept the consent agenda as presented.
Moved by Counselor Elliott. Counselor Billingsley, we'll start with you with your committee report. Mike.
Wanted to say that attended the Chamber of Commerce State of the Region address, and I do want to congratulate Councillor Elliott, Deputy Mayor, on a job well done. Very informative. Also attended the through the Rural Crime Prevention Project. It was a understanding group decisions workshop. And basically was helping with learning decision-making and understanding different styles and of opinions. Found it actually quite informative. It was about a 3-hour project, I guess. All the rest of meetings attended are listed on my report.
Counselor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't have anything to add. I guess I do. We had a meeting with Minister Wilson, Paul and I did, and the minister is looking at how we're going to be moving forward with a warming shelter and a shelter for non-housed people. So that's something positive, and he's working with us to do such. Thank you.
Mr. Lonsdale.
Besides the regular committee of the whole and regular council meetings and the budget deliberations, I did attend the Care Gateway grand opening. Very nice new addition to our community. And I also attended the Chamber State of Wetaskiwin. And I myself would like to congratulate Councillor Elliott on a job well done too. And I also did the State of the City video filming. And I really hate seeing myself on film, but it turned out okay.
Counselor Blatz.
Yeah, so I finished off my climate leadership course and it was very informative. I learned a lot and I'm going to be sending out a more detailed report to council pretty soon here. I did attend the Spring Municipal Leaders event for the 2 days online. However, I don't have much to report on that as I was in the thick of being really, really, really sick at that point. So I actually don't remember much of it. I'm sure it was good. And then I did the State of Wetaskiwin address filming, which was fun. And then we just had another diversity and inclusion task force meeting, and that was great because we're already on the road for our anti-racism campaign that Katimovic just put together. And so we now have a poll online for people to fill out if they would like. And so we're trying to gather some information there. And we've also kind of nailed down some events that we would like to attend as a group and try to figure out how we can get our name out there and try to tell people that we're here, and trying to figure out a reporting system and everything too for anybody facing racism. So, yeah.
Counselor Nielsen.
Thank you. Two things, I guess, to point out. One, the Care Gateway arrived a bit late, and I think I bothered them because I stayed quite a bit later. But had some really interesting conversations with staff there about some of the issues that they were dealing with, and again, how it impacted the shelter. The other thing I'd like to point out was just to council is that as of late, our executive director of FCSS has been on leave, and our chairperson, one of our committee members, Wendy Hoyle and Cheryl Friesen, have sort of played the lead there. And they've worked really closely with Paul Edginton, who's worked pretty extensively on our behalf with the government of Alberta to deal with surplus dollars and what was approved and not approved. And now a lot of that information will be coming back to FCSS Council to have further discussions and attempt to move things forward. Happy to note that our executive director is back to work, so things should be on the upswing at this point. Thank you.
Counselor Eberly.
Thank you. I had a pretty quiet month, all things considered. I did attend the spring caucus, and I think I remember a little bit more than Gabby, but if I'm being honest, I was moonlighting at my other job, so I had to leave a couple times. And then I started taking the municipal corporate and planning and finance course, but I missed the last two due to my health. So I'll have to retake it. Thank you.
Just like to thank Deputy Mayor Elliott for standing in for me last minute for the state of the city. My runny nose and headache prevented me from coming. Thanks everybody for all the work you've been doing over the last month. With that, I will look for your vote. Item 9, delegations. Welcome, Inspector.
Morning. Happy Monday. Today I have a quick overview of our annual performance plan surveys that were electronically that went out here end of February into March. And also I'll give you an idea of what the policing priorities that we've been finding in our local town halls that we've had in the last few weeks. I completed 6 town halls, 1 virtually for the city of Wetaskiwin. The remainder, because of the changing COVID rules in the first part of March, was able to get out in person in the communities of Westerose, Angus Ridge, Hay Lakes, New Norway, and Millet, and have an overview of what they thought the policing priority should be for this year. And I'm here to give you an update on the city survey on what the city residents that took the survey thought the policing priority should be and their concerns. Excuse me. And I've just have a brief PowerPoint here just to run through. I'm going to run through quickly. You've seen a lot of these slides before in my quarterly reports, just as a reminder what our priorities were last year. Go ahead, Karen. As you guys know, the annual performance plan is a roadmap. Every detachment in the country has to have one in the RCMP. And it helps us, it runs from April 1st to March 31st. I run on the same timetable as the tax man. And we're just coming to the end of our annual performance plan here at the end of March. Based on external and internal consultation, we determined what the policing priorities should be for the year. Sometimes these change, not often. They stay pretty consistent for the most part, and at least they have since I've been here for the last 5 years. And it provides the detachment senior management team with an overview of how we should be putting our policing dollars to work in the community, within the community. This is a blended plan that because in big scheme of things, the concerns in Westeros or Wetaskiwin or Camrose for that matter, stay pretty consistent for the entire zone. Concerns that you may see in the community of New Norway are very similar to the concerns that you'd see in Millet or Westeros and that sort of thing. Slightly different in the city, different city dynamics. So we have other issues that kind of pop up in the city. I'll use vagrancy as an example where, you know, there's not a whole lot of problems in those other smaller communities with regards to that, but it's something that's a concern that we have here in the city. Part of our consultation is also to bring back surveys and also to discuss with local councils on what they think the policing priority should be as well, and get feedback from yourself with regards to what your constituents might be telling you, maybe the policing priorities that hasn't already gotten back to us by way of other means. Next slide, please. So last year we had 5 priorities, 14 initiatives underneath each one of those priorities. It was an extremely busy annual performance plan. Too busy for me. I kind of let the NCOs drive last year's APP. They set some pretty high goals for themselves. We did fairly well on meeting all of them. They did very well based on how busy the annual performance plan was. Usually in my experience, anywhere from maybe 3 or a maximum of 4 priorities is where we should be looking. 5 was a rather busy plan, but like I said, we were able to meet most of our goals inside the plan. Next slide, please. So just as a quick reminder, you've seen these slides in my quarterly report. The priorities that we had last year: drug enforcement, prolific offender management, and these are the initiatives that we use to combat those priorities. Next slide, please. Then we had persons crime, property crime, and then the last being community engagement. Next slide. So those were the 5 priorities we had last year. There's some similarities to other plans, like property crime has been on that, and also community engagement has been on several different plans. And prolific offender management is another one that we see fairly regularly. Next slide, please. Overall results from the end of March, we had there's only 1 week worth of this last week of March, but we don't have the results on. But overall search warrants, we were able to, one of the priorities we had was to write as major search warrants. We completed 18 of 12. Intel meetings, 32 of 12. Trafficking investigations were down slightly. That was due to a lot of major chop shop investigations and things like that that the crew team got involved in. Property crime and drug investigations go hand in hand, and sometimes we get led into another way to work on property crime when we may start as a drug investigation and it actually pivots into something major, into a major property crime. Curfew checks, 199 out of the 600. We talked about that last quarter. We did better in the 4th quarter than we have. But again, that got kind of sidelined a little bit because of the new program that came out of K Division, which was in regards to our hotspot checks. I think I explained that last visit that I was here with regards to the hotspot checks, which the members took on. They embraced that pretty heavily with 764 checks. Social media, 32 of 52, a little short on that one. With regards to the new Facebook profile we have out. And that's just a little bit of a learning curve on what we can get out into that piece. It's new for us. Usually a lot of our community information stuff is driven by division or district. This is something for us to use at a more local level, and we're embracing that quite nicely. Community presentations, 15 of 8. Boat patrols, that's a rural thing, 8 of 8. And then downtown foot patrols, 324 of 250. Again, we've moved our foot patrols from wherever the pressures may have been. It went from the shelter on Main Street, it's pivoted over to the camp, and then pivoted back over to the new shelter where it's over, and now transitioning to over by the mall, which is seeing some pressures from the shelter being located on the south end. So wherever the issues or the pressures have been put to us, we modified where our foot patrols would go. Next slide, please. So that was just a quick rundown of the APP priorities and how we did last year. Overall, this is January to December for the full year on our, and this is very similar to the last quarter that you saw. Overall criminal code is at 0%. It's not going up, not going down. We've saw a decrease in other criminal code by 20%. Good news, 17% down on break and enters. We maintained that real good head start that we got around this time last year. It was down by about 67%. And then we've continued, it's come up a little bit over the last little while towards the end of the year, but we were able to have an overall decrease of 17%. 92 vehicles stolen, same as last year, so 0. And then a slight increase, 26% increase in theft under. Next slide, please. So just a quick breakdown. This is the same as the crime gauge that you saw yesterday, and just the overall counts in those. Of note, what you like to see on these is when you do view these is not only the change from year to year from 20 to 21, but also have a look at the 5-year trend, which is significant in that. And I'll show you here in a couple where, over the 5-year, you see that person's crimes down 2%, but it's up 38% from last year. And that's just an overall run over the last 5 years. And if you also look, other criminal code is down 28% over the 5-year average, and then down 20% this last year. Next slide, please. So property crime, and again, this is a good look. And again, I urge you to look at both sides of this. 17% down from last year, overall 13% decrease over the last 5 years. Theft of motor vehicle, although 0 from last year, we're down 46% on the 5-year average. Theft overs have increased, and I think I touched on that last quarter from 8 to 18 from last year. Please take a measure on the percentages. When the numbers are small and they increase significantly, the percentages can go up quite significantly. So, but what we have seen there is, and I did a run on this last quarter, was large box trailers or flat deck trailers and gooseneck trailers were stolen this last year. I think it was a total of 12 over the year, which bumped up our theft over. So it doesn't fall into the theft of motor vehicle because it's not a motor vehicle, but they're pricey items, so they're over $5,000. So that's what was driving that stat. Where are we at here? So an overall down up only 5% this past year as a total. Next slide, please. So the results of the survey. So the online survey, this is, I think, our 4th year we've done the electronic survey. The results were 64 people took the survey online. The percentages are there with regards to age and also demographic. Most of the people that took the survey were female, 67%. And then the age is 31, 29%, the biggest being the age group of 60 to 74. I was encouraged at that in one way that it's mostly retired folk that are taking the survey, but they're embracing technology. They're actually online and they're actually taking the survey, which I found encouraging. And then the employment demographic of the people that were taking the item, and this can kind of give us some bearing on what we might see as their priorities. Most were retired, 25% retired, 14 in the healthcare industry, and then 10% in either industry related background. Next slide, please. So the results were accordingly here, and I won't go into too heavy a detail on reading them all, but the ranking 3.62 was the highest ranking is 1, lowest ranking being 9. So the top 3 priorities for the city are major property crime being theft, over 5,000. Break and enters and theft of motor vehicle. Crimes against persons came second, and family violence came third. And you move down the line, impaired driving was in the middle of the pack. Illegal drug related offenses were down a little further. Community engagement was also an issue that came on the list here. Youth engagement, and this was the community engagement, and specifically the youth engagement was something we saw not only in Wetaskiwin, but in the rural communities as well. And then transiency and vagrancy was at 6.6. So those were the results of the survey of the 64 persons. Next slide, please. We, at the town hall and also online, we had a link, a UQR link for people to fill out the survey. It was a direct link to that survey. The survey was advertised in the local newspaper. There was also did an article on the annual performance plan. There's about a three column page ad, or sorry, that Christina Mack did with the local paper, and then advising folks to take the survey. The survey was sponsored by the city of Wetaskiwin on their website, on the county of Wetaskiwin, Millet, and also Camrose Council websites as well to support taking the survey. Next slide. That's where we're at. So those were the results, quickly the results of the survey. I'll open the floor to questions that you guys may have, comments on what you guys think the policing priorities should be for this year. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that, Inspector. I have a few questions.
Sure.
With regard to the town hall meetings, my understanding is only 5 people showed up in Wetaskiwin.
4
My goodness.
logged in. Yeah.
So 4 people and then 69 total for the survey doesn't give you much of a base on which to.
Yeah, I'd like to see a better attendance to that.
Yes.
I was really looking forward to getting face-to-face with people. The town halls that I was actually to have face-to-face with people are much more productive, although
Yes.
you might only have 17 people in the room, but if you have 17 people that come out to the Angus Ridge Hall 6:30 at night in the middle of a snowstorm, they've got something to say. So, yeah, I was a little disappointed on the attendance. We had about 19 last year that logged in. We did a similar advertising campaign to doing the survey and to do the town halls. Maybe perhaps some of this is a little bit virtual meeting to death. But I noticed that once the rules changed with regards to starting in March and the Alberta rules and being able to meet in, I mean, it actually took off
For
very well.
sure.
I think it was total of 67 people in the other communities, total all in. Total of almost 20 people showed up at Millet. So it was
Wow.
actually a pretty good turnout.
I just have a few questions.
Sure.
Foot patrols.
Yep.
versus tours. So you had 324 downtown patrols or going to but there are a number of concerns in the southwest corner of Wetaskiwin for break-in enters and theft, and Councillor Billingsley and I just received another one of a break-in last night, and I'm just wondering how, like, are the patrols? We have security out in that area. There's somebody hired, but are the patrols going on a somewhat regular basis?
Yes, they are. The membership know that our pressures are in the southwest corner. If it's not a call for service that's taking them nowhere, then they know that they're going to be in that particular area. The foot patrols are actually dedicated patrols where they actually will go to our areas of concern, actually get out of the vehicle and walk a beat and take a walk around the area and interact with people that they may find there. So those are actually the actual dedicated patrols, was the ones that were on foot patrol. The members are on patrol all the time and are in that area on a regular basis as well. That also spins into the hotspot check, where through analytics, we are able to locate where our calls for service are, where we have multiple calls for service, and that will then become a hotspot. And so you add to that the foot patrols, plus you add to it the number of hotspot checks that we had. And just to remind me, 700 and some. You add those together, 900 and some odd dedicated patrols into certain areas in the city where crime is prevalent.
So a patrol would take how long?
It all depends on how far you're going.
Okay,
We also have 4 dedicated areas in the rural area as well, and a couple out in Camrose as well that the Camrose member takes care of. But we also have some in the rural area where we have a dedicated hotspot in Millet, for example, that's in and around the Petrocan, because
Yes.
Petrocan has had a few robberies and things like that, which then makes it a hotspot. The hotspots are not rigid either.
No.
We're analyzing them on a regular basis. So if, for example, let's call it the Legion is a hotspot perhaps for whatever reason. And if the following month or the following quarter, we do another analysis and there's no more calls for service there and another area becomes a hotspot, well, then we'll move the hotspot to that other area. We look for these trends of moving because our dedicated patrols in that area could very well displace crime, which means it moves 2 streets over
Yes.
or wherever it can move to another part of the city. And we just have to move and pivot with that change, right? So I can't tell you exactly how long it
no,
would
no.
take, you know,
Okay. No, that's
it
fine.
doesn't take a lot of time to drive around the mall and get out, walk through the mall, talk to the security guy and talk to whoever might be out front. And then get back in the vehicle and do another patrol on the south end and away we go. So as our calls for service are primarily in that area, the vehicles are coming and going. They are patrolling when they're going to calls for service and or returning to the office as well.
Okay. Thank you. I noticed in one of your slides, there was you and Trent Yeager are looking at bear spray.
Yes.
We had some people in last week concerned about bear spray, and other municipalities have bear spray, anti-bear spray bylaws. Can you tell me what your thoughts are on this, please?
It was one of our items from last year that we did some research on. We started to move forward with it. And at the time, Minister Madhu, who was the Solgen at the time, made a comment in a public comment to the effect that perhaps people should be able to carry bear spray to protect themselves. That kind of threw a break onto our bylaw. If the local Solgen, if the provincial Solgen is saying that perhaps people should be able to do that, we kind of put a pause on that particular bylaw for that particular reason, just to see if that was going to come to fruition or if that was going to be just a comment. I think you'll see that initiative back on our priority
Okay.
for next year. On that note, we do see, the use of offensive weapons is up. So that kind of segues nicely with that
Yes.
particular crime type that we might want to look at. So,
Okay.
but that was the reason why we
Okay.
stopped it, was
Yes.
the fact that because the Solgen made these comments, we wanted to do a little more research and say whether or not, okay, is there some sort of, we don't want to make a bylaw that then it's going to have to be repealed because provincially they say something different.
But other municipalities do have it.
Do have-
correct?
do
So we
have
could
it, yeah.
follow their lead.
Yes.
Okay, I just have a couple of other questions. When you arrest somebody 6 times in a month,
Yes.
that goes down as 6 cases, correct? Not 1 case?
Yes, generally speaking.
Yes.
So if we get a call for service, we go to, and we arrest somebody that's a call for service, that would be one particular file or one investigation. If
Mhm.
it's involving the same person, then that would be 6 files in relation to that person or that address.
Yes.
Where there might not be an extra file generated is if there was already a file generated on a certain event. And perhaps we find that person somewhere else and we arrest him in relation to that file. Then there wouldn't be a second file made for that. Or if there is an outstanding warrant for that person's arrest, for example, if we arrested and charged somebody and they failed to appear in court, they don't generate another file for the fail to appear in court. It's
Okay.
the same, works off the same file.
Okay. And the last thing, I'm wondering, what can the city do to help the RCMP with public education about theft and reporting drug houses and those kinds of things? Because it is an education process, and the RCMP need our help. And I realize that you can't be everywhere and be all things to all people. So how can the city help educate people?
When you hear from your constituents with regards to, hey, I've got a problem with theft in my neighborhood, have you reported it to the police? And we've got to remember that these stats we have here are just the ones that are reported to the police. You know, there's a certain percentage that don't get reported to us. This is just a kind of an overview or a snapshot, so to speak. Encourage them to report, regardless of how small the call might be, have them report the call. And we will then, it may very well be a key piece to another ongoing crime trend that's going on somewhere else. Best thing for that would be to, in order to help us, is to make sure that they are making their calls for service. And if it's repeat property crime, or if it's repeat break and enter or something like that, they should be coming to the surface on our program lockup, we call it, which if a resident has been a victim of a break, or a business has been multiple B&Es, we'll actually send either Sergeant Yeager or one of our members that is CEPTED trained to go and do an analysis on their property to see what sort of crime prevention through environmental design options might be available to help target harden their property perhaps. So the biggest thing from the city perspective is to continue to support Sergeant Yeager in helping us with those CEPTED reviews, which is important. We also have a couple members that are also trained, but we also leverage Trent Yeager from time to time to do those CEPTED assessments for us, because he is trained in that way. And that's a good partnership between bylaw and RCMP for sure. The other piece is to ensure that if the people haven't made the call, to make the call to us and log the complaint, so that we can have an idea that that neighborhood may turn into a hotspot if we get enough calls for service in that particular area.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two questions here, Keith. Karen, could you go back to the survey priorities, please? Right, thank you. So this is sort of a follow-up to Councillor Elliott's comment about the number of respondents to the survey. So based on 60 plus people, this is what they said their priorities were. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Keith.
Sure. Okay.
So if you didn't have these 60 responses and you had to make some decisions for your office and your officers, what would your three priorities be? Because as Bill said, 60 people representing the city of Wetaskiwin and the county is a pretty small number. So
Sure.
You're in the business, you know what's going on in the community. Where would you put your bullets?
And it goes in conglomeration with the rural areas as well, right? And I haven't had our meeting with our NCOs yet to ask them what they think the priority should be. So the next piece of this is to get all the information external, bring it into the office, and then have a meeting with my NCOs before we put the plan together. But just overview of the other communities, property crime was almost in every single community that I did a town hall in. Prolific offender management is one of the ones that I discuss a fair bit. You've heard this before, the 8 to 10% of the bad guys that are doing 80% of the crime. And then drug enforcement. Again, we have to be careful that drugs and property crime go hand in hand. When I say prolific offender management, I'm talking about property crime, all of it. The theft of motor vehicles, theft over, theft under, break and enters. Prolific offender management is where the RCMP and police officers can have the most bang for buck on driving crime down. Persons crime, very hard to, unless you're doing prolific offender management for someone who repeatedly beats their spouse or repeatedly gets in a bar fight or repeatedly is just causing grief on the streets. It's very hard for police to put a crime reduction strategy in for, say, assault, because you almost have to be there when the assault's being taken place. Now, that's where our hotspots come in. We have a corner of walk and don't walk in Wetaskiwin, and every Friday night at midnight, there's an assault happening. Well, we'll be there when that happens, and that's a crime reduction strategy. But it's very, very hard. Where we can get the most bang for buck is when we look at our prolific offenders and concentrate our efforts on the select property crime. And that's the break and enters, theft over, theft under, and theft of motor vehicle is where we should be putting our main resources on this.
And so when you talk about prolific offender management, does that also include the, I can't remember what the terminology is, the home checks, the
Curfew checks, yes.
curfew checks?
That is
That's
number
part of-
one with a
that's part
bullet.
of it.
With
But
the
the-
curfew
but-
check is the prolific offender management.
But in this last year, you have not hit your target in that area.
No, and part of that was a little bit was the new hotspot check became, and it's easier for the members to do the hotspot checks than it is to do the prolific offender check. Although I'll argue that. They tell me it's easier to do it, but it's just more or less the same. You go to the prolific offender's house or you go to the hotspot, one of the two. I mean, it's 50 in my opinion. Part of the hotspot check, which is trending with the members at this particular fund, which led us away from the prolific offender management to a certain extent. And there's another piece to this I'll get back to, is it's very easy for them to do this hotspot check because we've created a file for that particular location. And all they have to do is go to that location, do a patrol in that area, pick up the phone in our pros data center, and someone else does the report for them and it adds it to the file. Right. So it's very quick and very easy for them to do that. Where if they're doing a prolific offender management, then it's okay. It's up, knock on the door, talk to Johnny. Johnny's not there. Where is he? Talk to mom, talk to somebody else, maybe check with a neighbor. It's a little more, there's a little more investigation involved in those. And if there is a breach, well, then there's a file that comes behind that for the breach itself. Now we put some administrative functions in that to alleviate as much of that admin burden off the members. They don't have to. They only have to do a portion of that investigation. They don't have to do all of it. Most of it is administrative, so it's done by support staff. But again, once they got onto that hotspot routine, it kind of took over. So the other piece is the remnants of COVID over the last couple of years is when we went into a heavy lockdown, everybody was locked down and the bad guys were actually staying home. And or if they're out and about, they were quickly checked, or their concern was they were going to get stopped and checked. Like, why are you about? And that'd be the first year of COVID. Second year, we kind of rode the COVID wave a little bit. A lot of people were home taking care of their stuff. So the opportunities to do B&Es and thefts and things like that were less. But on the prolific offender side of things, the members will go to the house, he's home. The member goes to the house, he's home. Okay, we won't stop checking him. Well, even though we should continue, they feel, okay, well, he's abiding and, we'll go on to something else. So they moved on to something else. So a couple of things there that kind of moved us off prolific offender management. My leadership will say, we have to pivot back and stay on top of the prolific offender management, specifically for our break and enters and our theft of motor vehicles and our property crime stuff. By far.
Thank you. My next question is, you talk about hot spots and foot patrols. So
yeah,
do we have, and I know every community has a different policing plan.
Yeah.
But do we have comparisons? So can we look at a like kind of community and say, so what kind of response are you getting on hotspots and foot patrols and prolific management? Like, how do you compare yourself to other operations?
I look, but I try not to compare too closely. Every community is different.
Yeah, for sure.
But I can honestly say when the membership embraces prolific offender management and when they really know, once they learn how to do property crime, it's a learning curve. When they know that they're talking to the prolific offender, they're talking to their associates, they know where to go. And when the members really embrace that work, property crime goes down. And then just following through and staying consistent with being on top of those 8 to 10% of the criminals that are doing 80% of the crime. I've seen it in other areas. I'll use Bashaw, for example. I know the new commander that came in here a couple of years ago, he really is on this property crime, political offender management, being out there knocking on their doors at 1 o'clock in the morning. And man, property crime just dropped, right? Because of that added pressure, right? I'm a believer in the political offender management and the property crime and the crime reduction strategies we can apply to that. And when it comes to crime severity index, break and enters carry a high value on the crime severity index. So as long as you don't have a real influx in, and I'll use the H word, we went almost 2 full years in the city without a homicide, almost 2 years to the date. And our CSI is going to drop significantly because we didn't have those homicides this last year. It takes a lot of break and enters to be thwarted before you take away I think it's 7,000 in some points for a homicide. Well,
Yeah.
you gotta almost eliminate all property crime to have a dent. And if you have 3 or 4 homicides, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
But where you want most bang for buck on crime reduction strategies in property crime, because those are the ones that police can help the most and have the most effect. Dragging down break and enters have a very high level on the crime severity index, so you can drop it that way with regards to property crime. Wetaskiwin is not unique, but it is unique in a certain way. It has some pressures that other communities don't deal with. We also have, a significant amount of persons crime in the community, which keeps the members busy and away from those other priorities that we may have. So it becomes a time management. Our criminal code file piece, and you've heard me talk about this before. We were very, very high at one particular juncture when I first got here, but 197 was the average for Wetaskiwin, and we were at 90. The provincial average for a municipality of our side was 92. So we were almost double, right? Now we've dragged that down. I think it's around 145 now, which taken a significant amount off that. That's adding members plus dropping crime. So I tend not to compare too closely because not every community, there's not another perfect model of Wetaskiwin out there that I could use. But what I do see is those communities that really embrace political offender management, specifically on property crime, have some good effect on that.
Great, thank you. And the reason I asked the question, Keith, about comparators is that as I look at some of the stats, and this is going to sound judgmental, and it's not meant to be because I've got nothing to compare it to. But when we talk about hotspots and foot patrols, we're talking about almost 1,000.
Mhm.
And in the big scheme of things, that sounds like a really big number. But what it works out to is about 2.5 patrols a day in a 24-hour shift. And so if we know we have hotspots and maybe multiple hotspots, does that mean we're hitting them maybe once every 2 or 3 days? Or because, as I say, it averaging 2.5 hotspots and foot patrols a day doesn't sound like, when I talk about 1,000, it sounds like a lot. When I talk about how many a day, it doesn't sound like many at all. So, but I have no comparator to make.
When we develop these hotspots and we go there, there's a reason we have that particular hotspot, because we've had calls for service in that particular area. And I can tell you by looking at some GPS mapping that we've had a look at. And when we put the hotspot check on the map, we're by that area daily, multiple times a day. It's surprising that we haven't worn the tires down going down 40th Avenue and turning south on Highway 2A to go down to in and around the south end of town. Our members are in these, they're making the point of actually going there, say in the early morning hours, to see what crime might be happening there. But they're by that intersection multiple times a day. And it's part of their patrol program. I think you've heard me say this before, Mr. Nielsen, when a good cop who's been in town for a couple of years, when he goes out and he decides to go left or right out of the parking lot, it depends on the time of day. And it depends on what he's got on his plate at the time.
Yeah.
If he's got nothing specifically going at the time and it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, I can almost guarantee you he's turning right and he's heading to the south end of town. Now, we've got multiple hot spots down that end of town, but if B&Es are happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's not going to go do a hotspot check
No.
when the business is open,
Yeah.
right? But he's going to drive by that business multiple times a day.
Okay.
And we are all over the city on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Counselor Wamsley.
Thank you, sir. Keith, I'm just looking and I'm surprised how far down illegal drug-related offenses are.
Yeah.
For me, I think everything above it almost stems from that. And what I hear from many citizens, especially major property and minor property crime, they all kind of feed off of that. And I think it's probably hard to maybe, if you take down a drug house, obviously, and you find that stolen piece of equipment, it's pretty easy. But, and like I say, that's what I hear from the streets. I guess, what is your, take on that?
You're absolutely right. You said it perfectly.
Yeah, I don't hear that very often.
Drug-related offenses and property crime go hand in hand. It is a hand in a glove. You won't have one without the other. It's one of the reasons that drugs became one of our priorities this last year was we had some bad fentanyl in town. We were having some overdoses and people were dying. So as a result of that, we said, okay, well, let's push drug enforcement to the top of our list with regards to the crew team. So, hey, crew team, let's pivot a little bit. Let's start really hitting on the drug houses and the drug, trafficking and that sort of stuff. But you're absolutely right. We go and we hit a drug house and the garage is full of stolen property, right? So they literally go hand in hand. Or we're at one, we don't get much drugs, but we get a whole bunch of stolen property, and then that spins us into a couple of property files. So going to our most recent, this last Friday, week ago Friday, we did a suppression shift where we brought in some extra members and stopped everything that was coming and moving and going, and we went to some known areas, did a traffic stop, found a truck full of criminals with a bunch of stolen property in it, which then led us to do a search warrant this last Friday afternoon out in the rural area. And we found another chop shop, so to speak. So, and that was a partnership investigation. It was actually just over the border into Leduc's area, just northwest of Millet. So, but these criminals are doing all kinds of crime in our area as well. So it was a good partnership piece. But you're absolutely right. Drugs, property crime. If it was me, I would put drugs a little higher on this list, but this is the community's comments, right? We take this and take this information, we take the information we come from you. I put it together with our members and we make our list based on all the information we receive. And we take our expertise and we say, no, this one should move up a little bit. Ooh, this one, transient and vacancy was quite low this year, right? Significantly low. So, okay, but I still know it's going to be an issue in the city. So it's not going to go away. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been asked and answered. Keith, you had said something about the bear spray with the Solgen, saying that there might be some possibility there that whether he goes with enforcement or not. But your comment was, we'll have to take a look at this last year. Was that a slip or possibly later this year?
It was one of our initiatives on our APP last year, was to write a bear spray bylaw and implement it. What we were seeing was that bear spray was the weapon of choice in a lot of our robberies. It's a weapon of opportunity. People were carrying it on a regular basis, not just the small dog-sized ones, but the party kegs with the handle. And they were going in and fogging a liquor store and then stealing and then running out of the liquor store. So it was the weapon of choice in several robberies that we had. So that's why we looked at it from a point of view, okay, well, let's put something in place similar to other communities of a bear spray bylaw itself. It's not illegal to possess bear spray. As soon as you use it as a weapon, it's illegal. It's an assault with a weapon. I mean, this glass can be a weapon if I hit somebody with it, right? It's not a weapon as it sits there, but as soon as I pick it up and use it, it's a weapon. The bear spray bylaw would give us the opportunity that if you stop somebody and they have a can of bear spray on them, you can then seize it, take it, charge them for being in possession of it. Now, great deal of officer discretion. Please understand that, if Sue is on her way out to Yaha Tinda to go camping for the weekend and she's got a Canadian Tire bag with 2 cans of bear spray in it, we're not going to be seizing it from her and taking it and charging it. She's got and her story is, I'm going camping. But if we stop a vehicle in Wetaskiwin at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a party-sized jug in the cup holder of a car full of folks that are up to no good, we'll take that away so it can't be used as a weapon inside the city.
But I guess my question is this something that we are going to be looking at this year or next year?
We'll look, we're gonna,
Okay,
some of the items that are on our initiatives, if they didn't take traction, we might, if we thought, yeah, it had some merit, and I think we're just gonna give it another go, we'll give it another go. Our prolific offender management has been, our curfew check thing has been on every APP since I got here. So I don't see that one going away. Do we tweak it? Do we do it a different way? Then I got a couple other things on the Crown side of things I want to fix on that too, but that's for another day.
you had alluded to bear spray at liquor stores and robberies at liquor stores. I'm wondering if what your feelings are on having security entrances for our local liquor stores.
Yes, and again, that could be another initiative that we could take on. I know we looked at that pretty heavily, not this last year before. I think it was not last year before, we did a full rundown on all the types of different offenses that were occurring at the liquor stores. I think it would be a good start. Again, it's pretty cost heavy on the proprietor to install that kind of stuff. I'd have to do a little more research in it. I know that Edmonton has it in a lot of their liquor stores that, you have to scan your ID before you go in, so we know who's going in, that sort of stuff. This is all part of that SEPTED stuff as well. Also, you don't keep the usually stolen items right near the till by the door. You put them somewhere else, right? So, but that's just
But if
that's
they're
target
getting,
hardening, right?
but if they're getting robbed,
Yeah,
it's costing them money as well,
for sure.
right? What about banning of single serve? What's your feeling on,
Sure.
is there an issue?
I think there is, based on the amount of substance abuse we do have in the community. But single serve or a 26, it's going out the door and it's being consumed. So I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, really, on that particular venture. We have a lot of our folks in the community that will pool their resources and buy a bigger bottle and then consume it either publicly or surreptitiously, jointly. So whether he goes and he buys a single serve or whether he goes and he buys a case with 3 friends, it's very similar. So whether that would have a significant effect, maybe on some minor shoplifting, maybe, but as far as the illegal consumption and that sort of stuff, one or the other, I think it's there. So.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I guess to answer, sorry, I'd have to see some data on that. Another community perhaps that has put that in place, and then whether or not we could, I'd have to see some numbers on it. If someone's done that, then I'd like to see some numbers to say, okay, well, maybe it's something I'm not seeing.
What would the percentage of stolen vehicles be having the keys in it?
Haven't run that number for a while, but 38% of the vehicles that were stolen in the city either had the vehicles in it, keys in it, keys in the center console, keys on the nail, and the keys were an easy
Stolen with the
access to the
keys.
vehicle. So it's either it was left running with the keys. So 38% of the time, the keys were used in some way to steal the vehicle. 42% in the rural area.
I'll entertain a motion and then
Is there, just before we go to the motion, is there any other priorities, anything that constituents are telling or banging? I can interpret most of these questions, I think, but if there's any specific policing priority that you guys would have.
Just one thing that comes to mind, Keith, is gangs.
Okay.
Because there's supposedly more gang activity in the city now.
Yeah, we did look at that last year. And we're going to have to look at how we did on that particular one. We pivoted halfway through on this last year. It was initially, let's look and see if we can identify the gang members that are associating town and what's the number, and you actually kind of look to see, is there an issue here? Is it just peripheral to the nation perhaps, or to someplace out of Edmonton? But we didn't see a huge count, like it wasn't prolific, right? And then we pivoted to, okay, well, let's just start talking with these folks that are identified and see if we can get them into an exit strategy. So we kind of pivoted from a, let's do a count, to let's try and do some interaction with these folks. I'll have to go back and talk to Corporal Zayowski, who is the one who was running the program, to see what our overall effects were with that program. We've referred several of them. The Open Door was working with us quite closely on that one before they closed in August, as far as trying to engage those folks and getting them into some sort of programming, but we'll have another look at that one.
But
Through the chair to Sue. So you asked what feedback we could give you.
Yep.
And do we need to have a conversation as a council so Kevin throws out an idea and Keith puts it on his list, and Gabby throws out an idea and Keith puts it on his list? That doesn't really reflect council's perspective. So are we going to take this report that Keith asked, have a conversation amongst ourselves, and then provide sort of a consolidated position back to Keith for his document? How best to proceed, I guess?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, Karen's been trying to find time for council to get together, so we'll finalize that today, have that session, get your feedback, and we'll present that to Keith before he finalizes
Okay,
his
great,
report.
Thank you.
April 7th.
someone like to make the motion? Councilor Blatz.
I'd like to make the motion, but I'd also like to amend it because we're not in committee of the whole. So I move that City Council receive the report titled RCMP Community Policing and Priorities Survey Results and Discussion dated March 28th, 2022 as information.
Moved by Councilor Blatz. Anything further? Already, Councilor Elliott.
I would just like to say thank you to Keith and his members. You don't have an easy job.
Sorry?
You don't have an easy job, and most of the time when you're interacting with people, it's not in a positive way. And so I just really have a lot of respect for what you and the members do, and want to say thank you.
I'll pass it on. Thank you very much, sir. It's okay. We're good. I got a lot of good people.
We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Did you click that you moved it, Gabby?
Yep.
Did you guys have your own buttons yet?
Okay. Those in favor? Carried unanimously. Extra unanimously.
Thanks, folks. Anything else for me? We're good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
You as well.
Are you around this week, Keith? Item 12A bylaws, bylaw 2014-22 to amend the subdivision and development appeal board bylaw 1900-18.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. This is something that Ledge Services and I were looking at. We don't get that many SDB appeals, but when we do, we wanted to be proactive here and particularly identify the one aspect of the bylaw that outlines the procedures for hearings, particularly that there was the one clause that said that the SDB would issue a verbal notice of decision immediately after the hearing. And we wanted to amend this because that isn't best practice anymore. It used to be, but just with the complexity of the legislative framework around planning and land use decisions, it is certainly in the SDAB's best interest to not issue a verbal decision at the time. Make sure that the decision is well thought through and that all aspects of particularly all the legislation is well considered. So under the MGA, the SDAB does need to issue a decision within 15 days and it needs to be in writing with reasons. Often, as I've looked back, a lot of these decisions may not have been issued with fulsome reasons. And so this was just something about the procedures that we wanted to amend. Looking forward to, potentially getting an appeal in the future. We want to make sure that those reasons are fully, fully reasoned. This doesn't preclude the SDAB from issuing a verbal decision if it is something that is particularly time sensitive and they need a decision that day. The SDAB can still do that. We just don't want to. We wanted to take the shall out of there and say may instead. While we were looking at this, there were a couple other aspects of the bylaw, particularly section 10.5. It's just an incomplete quote from the MGA. And we just thought it'd be best to take it out because that is covered under the MGA. It doesn't need to be in this bylaw, and we just want to make sure that it is in alignment completely. So that is, I believe, everything I have. The motions are there before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Through the chair to Andrew. So Andrew, then the only change then is, I'm assuming, item 7.5, where it says the decision may then be communicated as opposed to shall be, or?
Correct. That's the most substantial change. There are a few other changes in this bylaw, but they're mostly for clarity. But yes, that is.
But that's the point you were trying to get to.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's
Thank you.
right.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that City Council approve first reading of bylaw 2014-22 to amend the subdivision and development appeal board bylaw 1900-18. I have one thing. Karen and I just finished our course with SDAB and we both passed, and Karen got a much higher mark than me. That's all. Oh, geez. Okay, I'm not making any more motions. Mr. Mayor, I would move that council approve second reading of bylaw. Just a second, my screen got covered up here. Bylaw 2014-22 to amend the subdivision appeal board bylaw 1900-18. Mr. Mayor, I'd move that council give unanimous consent to provide third reading for bylaw 2014-22 to amend the subdivision and development appeal board bylaw 1900-18.
Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously.
And Mr. Mayor, I would move that City Council approve third and final reading of bylaw 2014-22 to amend the subdivision and development appeal board bylaw 1900-18.
Moved by Councillor Elliott. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously. Item 12B, bylaw 2015-22 to revise bylaw 1997-21, land use bylaw amendment.
Thank you very much. So this is actually, I'm coming forward with my tail between my legs a little bit. As we brought this land use bylaw amendment 1997-21 forward last summer, since then we've been putting together a consolidated land use bylaw. And as we did that, we realized a lot of these numbers aren't lining up. And it turns out that the bylaw draft document that we had been working with, the Word document itself, was slightly different than the actual official bylaw, which meant that just in section 1, the definitions, the numbers didn't line up. And so we thought the best way to fix this would be to bring the revision forward. So under section 630 of the MGA, bylaw can be revised. And so that would refer to any revisions or any changes that are not material. So things like clerical errors and numbering. So that's what these are. So even though this is a land use bylaw that would typically need 2 hearings and an advertised public or 2 readings, two separate council meetings, 3 readings, public hearing, those aren't necessary now because it's just a revision. But that revision is a separate bylaw. So the only changes there are the numbers, and those are all addressed in the revision. Sorry, there are 2 non-numbering clerical errors where one definition was duplicated, and this definition of gaming was one of those that was actually introduced into this Word document, but that definition was never actually approved in the original bylaw. So we are going to be not addressing it in the amendment because it wasn't actually in the bylaw in the first place. So I hope that's all clear. If council has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So no changes, just cleaning it up.
Yeah.
Councilor Billingsley,
I move that city council approve first reading of bylaw 2015-22.
moved by Councilor Billingsley. Any discussion? Go ahead.
Page 4, item HH. There's a G that isn't in capital. Is that correct? Am I on the right? Yeah. Page 4. It's different than on your screen than mine.
HH, that under 1 KK, is that what you're?
Yes. Z. Why is my screen different than yours? It's not. Oh,
What letter is it?
I've got under on page.
Don't worry about the page, just the,
Under section 129, home base business. That's strange. Mine doesn't look anything like that.
is it the W? For section 129?
Which is your screen? My. Right there. Right there.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Well, it was, but no, it's there. Thank you.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously.
I move that city council approve second reading of bylaw 2015-22.
Moved by Counselor Billingsley. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Move that city council give unanimous consent to third reading of bylaw 2015-22.
Moved by Counselor Billingsley. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously.
Move that city council approve third reading of bylaw 2015-22.
Moved by Counselor Billingsley. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously. I will entertain a motion to go in camera. Counselor Blatz.
Do you want me to read all three of them or just go in camera?
Nope, just the first one.
Okay, cool. I move that city council proceeds with the meeting in an in-camera session to discuss a matter which falls under section 17 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, exceptions to disclose.
Moved by Counselor Blatz. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried unanimously. We'll take an 8-minute bio break.